Hey Greenstylers, today we're going to sew the Bomdia dress. Alright, after you've cut out your pieces, you're going to have a back piece and a front piece. You're going to have two of the arm side bindings or bands and one neck band cut. The first step is to hem the bottom of the front and the back. So they're just going to turn that under and hem across the bottom. I'm going to use my cover stitch machine. If you don't have a cover stitch machine, you can just turn it up once and hem it with a stretch stitch, like a lightning bolt stitch or a zigzag. After you've hemmed the bottom edge, you're going to lay it out on your work surface. This is the back. And you're going to put the back and the front right sides together. And you're going to stitch along the side seams with a 3/4 inch seam allowance. So not 3/8, but 3/4 inch. Before you do this, an option, if you'd like, is to take your serger and run a serger stitch all the way around the edge. So on all 4 edges before you stitch it together. And then you can stitch it together on the side seams. I'm gonna forego the serger seam, I don't need that. Sometimes it helps you keep it a little bit straight and even, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just gonna stitch down with my sewing machine, not the serger. I'm gonna stitch down at 3/4 of an inch seam allowance along the side. So just put several pins down along the side seam at 3/4 of an inch. Or if you have one of those magnetic guides that goes on your sewing machine that fits near the plate, set that at 3/4 of an inch. So we'll sew down that. When you get to the very end, be really careful to make sure that the hemmed edges are lined up nice and straight and even, that one doesn't hang lower than the other. So now, after you've made that 3/4 of an inch seam allowance, we're gonna actually open this up, and then we're gonna stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge, or just really, really close to the edge. And this will be our channel or our casing for our drawstrings or ties that we're gonna put up the side. So I kind of find it easier to just do one side all the way. So stitch your side seam at 3/4 of an inch and then open that one up and do it make the casing before I move on to the second side. That way at least one side you can kind of have open flat. So it makes doing one side easier, I think, at least. So I'll just stitch down the side. If you are new to sewing and or still starting out, it might be beneficial for you to press this open if your fabric can go high enough temperature to allow for you to iron it. Or another option is to get seam tape or pressure tape, and you can put it down here underneath the seam allowance as you fold it, and then you can sew right over that, and that kind of keeps it open and flat on the sides, so your casing will look really neat and not messy. I'm going to increase my stitch length to about 3 for this step. Take your time here, don't get ahead of yourself. Sometimes for this step, it also helps to reduce your pressure foot, the pressure on your pressure foot. If you can move it to low, that often helps keep everything straight. As you can see, I'm stitching really close to that edge. As I get to the very, very end, I kind of pull and tug this a little bit so this rides up a little bit higher on that stitching so it doesn't hang down. I'm going to come down and I'm going to hit reverse and then cut my stitches or cut my threads. So we're going to do the same thing for the other side. Now we've got this casing done on that side. We're going to do the same here. Okay, now we're gonna do the side seams on the other side at 3/4 of an inch, and then make the casings on that side as well. One thing I do want to mention, as you're making this casing, I pull the fabric away from each other, from the seam, just to make sure that it doesn't bunch up underneath there. So just as I'm stitching, I just gently, very, very gently, make sure that it's pulled open all the way. All right, after you have made your 4 ties, the side ties, you're going to thread them through the casings that you created. So I'm using a tube turner. It just looks like this, and it's got like a little hook on this end, and then you can close a little lever to kind of close it up. I'm going to thread that through, starting at the bottom or the hemline, thread it all the way through the casing, all the way up to the top, or it's that arm side, the bottom of the arm side, all the way up there to the top. And then I'm going to hook my strap through, and then I'm going to pull it through. down in the casing. Just like that. Just like that. And then when I get it to the very end, when the strap is at the very end, right at the start of this casing, I am going to, it slipped in there a little bit. I had to fish it back out. All right, so right when it's at the very end, I'm just going to take a pen and pin it right there so it doesn't slip down again. And then I'm going to take my sewing machine and I'm going to baste right across that edge on both side seams, that side and that side. And a basting stitch is just a nice long stitch that you can pick out later if you want to or need to, or if it shows. You could also leave it in most cases. So that's one side and the other. Now we're going to sew the shoulder seams. The shoulder seams just get placed together along that edge. If you have the tank version, it'll look very similar to this. It'll just be much more narrow. And if you have the sleeved version, this is still the step you're going to do. It's just going to be a little bit wider. So with right sides together, stitch the shoulder seams, and don't forget to take 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, now I want to sew the neck band. And I'm going to sew it, I've already done this, but I'm going to sew right sides together, sew the short end, and then take it and mark center front by clipping here and here, and then match those clips with the center back and clip 2 more equal sections here and here. You can mark with a pen if you'd like. I just take my snips and I do a little short snip. We're going to do the same thing with our neck opening. We're going to break it up into 4 equal sections. So to do that, first you find the shoulder seams, put them together, and then mark the center back. And then go mark the center front. And then take those 2 points together and mark that, and you'll see that's not at the shoulder seam. So sometimes if you're new to this, you might make that mistake of assuming the shoulder seam is the midway point. It's usually not. So go ahead and do that. Mark that section. And now you have the neck opening marked into 4 equal sections as well. So you could take the band piece, fold it in half with right sides together, and then take and find the center back of your dress, Match that up. Now, you can use your sewing machine with a stretch stitch to stitch this in. I'm going to use the serger. Okay, I've gotten it started along the center back. And then I'm just going to continue to stretch the neckband just as much as needed to take up the slack and stretch it to fit with the neck opening.